Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. Welcome to live stream with TCCI Ministries. And I have Dr. Jay Smith with me. Peace of Christ be with you, Jay. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I can't share it with you because it's too big a file. Sorry. The people are wondering what's going on here. Why am I looking up and not at the people? It's because I'm trying to get this PowerPoint but I can't get it to her. So we're just going to have to do it off the top of our heads.
Okay. Should be fun. Should be fun. How are you doing, Jay? What have you been up to?
Well, I just got back from California. In fact, I just got back yesterday, and I was in California to talk in a few churches, but I was to introduce this material. In fact, what we're going to talk about today at a large church called Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, and Jack Hibbs, the pastor there, wanted me to introduce this new historical material, but in the context of what I decided to do, in the context of a debate that I'm having with Raymond Ibrahim. Ibrahim, I don't know if you know him, but he's
I Googled him. He's Egyptian, he's a bodybuilder, and then he kind of looks at the tradition of Islam. I kind of did a little
in
bit
that
Google of
order.
him before the
So
live stream.
he's an Egyptian first, then he's a bodybuilder second, then he is a critique of Islam. So taking that under your wing, understand that he didn't really look at my videos. What he did, a lot of people that are his disciples sent him. You've email after email, so you've got to shut down Jay Smith because of his historical critique, which he thinks is absolutely useless. He thinks it's the weakest of all polemics that we have. So I can understand why he put these two videos together. And those two videos he put together on April 9th and April 11th of this year, so just a few months ago. And basically
you are going too fast in case people are not following what's happening in the world, Jay.
Go ahead.
You just got back from California where you were teaching.
And I introduced this in a 2-hour period in front of about 500 people who came to listen just to this. How do you defend the historical critique? How do you defend what we're saying and what we're finding out about Muhammad historically? How can you do that, Jay? And I said, listen, let's just use Raymond Ibrahim as a platform. Let him attack me. Let's get his attacks, his challenges, and let's answer each one of them. Boom, 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 boom. And that's what I did on Sunday. So we're now, Thursday? 4 days later.
Okay, so that means I'll put it in kind of more broken English format for everyone. So Raymond Ibrahim put up two videos almost 2 months ago, why I believe in Muhammad, and then second one is why Muslims laugh at claims against Muhammad's existence. So one of them is 10 minutes 20 seconds, other one is 11 minutes 32 seconds, where he's kind of going after, he verbalized Jay's name, as well as he goes after people who kind of believe Muhammad, or who makes the argument that Muhammad historically didn't existed.
Not kind of. We do believe it. We do believe that. We don't kind of believe it. We actually do believe he didn't exist.
Okay, you are claiming.
Actually, but we actually believe he did not exist. No.
Okay, good.
I'm going to correct you on that.
Good. So you believe he didn't exist, and Raymond Ibrahim believes he was exist. Therefore, he put together two video to debunk your arguments, and we are going to go through that.
Now, before you go any further, let me just say that video of me giving a response to his 10 challenges is now up on YouTube. You can go on Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills YouTube site. They put it up. It's only been up a few hours. It's already had over 30,000 people watch it. So it is going big guns right now.
Wow, nice. I didn't check how many people watched this video. I think it was like almost 10 days ago when I got in touch with you. Someone sent it to me, so I didn't know who this gentleman is.
That's all right. Quite 30 people have sent it to me over the last 2 months. That's why they said you really need to respond to this, Jay. So that's why I responded to it.
Okay, it's good.
Listen, let me just say thank you, Raymond Ibrahim. Please take this as a thanks for doing this. You've done a great job. This is called peer review, and I want to be peer reviewed. Hatun has tried to do it. David Wood has tried to do it. They failed miserably. So now thank you, Raymond Ibrahim, for actually coming up with some salient points, academic points to shut me down. That's all I can say, because I know he'll want to see what my response is, and I want him to read them, and I want him to look at them, and maybe Hatun, we can do a debate, Raymond and I.
Yeah, I can get in touch with him, and then or if you've got his details, we can get in touch with him and then offer it, and then take it from there. I would be happy to arrange that or host that. So I don't know this gentleman, and his second video was titled "Why Muslims Laugh at Claims Christians Against Muhammad's Existence."
Yeah.
I looked at that video first because I thought that title was so funny. You meet with Muslims, especially the Arab Muslims, they laugh at child marriage. They laugh at they laughed at Quran is not being perfectly preserved, all those kind of things, and then now it looks like this gentleman is Christian because you've got you can see icons in his kind of back screen.
I think he's Coptic. I may be wrong, but I think he's Coptic.
So he's just like kind of looking, oh, poor Muslims are laughing at your arguments, or poor you who are Muslims are laughing at your arguments. I just want to say, well, they laugh at everything. They laugh at when they talk about what Muhammad did to Aisha. They laugh at when people are being murdered for drawing the pictures of Muhammad. They laugh at Muhammad did not exist. So let them laugh at it, but they will wake up one day.
No, wait a minute. Don't take my side. Take Raymond's
I'm not
side,
taking your
okay?
side. I just thought that was like very funny title for his video. I recently watched the Muslims who were just laughing at secret second wives. I sat with a Muslim man who sold his daughter, and then he was laughing at that because he was making money. So Arabs are laughing at lots of things.
I will tell you this, and we can get into this, but I will say that exactly the problems that you're coming up with Muhammad, they actually love Muhammad for doing those things. So they are laughing at much of the stuff we put out there.
Okay, so we've got two videos of him. One of them is titled "Why I Believe in Muhammad." So that's his first video, 10 minutes 20 seconds. So would you be okay if I start playing that video and then you kind of debunk the points he's making? You express
it's
that
going to take too long because they're all long videos. You can start playing, but I've got the 10 points from both videos, and I'll just go right through them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're the 10 major points that he makes.
It will be good to kind of first get to hear him and then see what he says, and then we get your point. Okay, so I'll play with the why he believes Muhammad has existed. Are you okay with that? Little bit of that?
Please do.
Okay. Confirm if you can hear the sound, and thank you very much for everyone who is joining us in the chat. So I haven't chit chat with Jay for a long time, so that was our chit chat. Now we are getting on with the business. Let's see.
Breaking news: Muhammad never existed. And once Muslims come to grips with this, as they're obviously destined to, Islam will die out. It's just a matter of time now. If you're not aware, there are people who are actually making this argument, or variants of it. And in this video, I'd like to address it, specifically to show how it is by far one of the absolute weakest arguments against Islam, one that is destined to continue having a zero impact on the Muslim world. All right, let's begin. Claims against the historicity of Muhammad are actually much older than many people think. Elements of it were being made well over a century ago by some Orientalists in Europe. I personally was first introduced to skeptical views of Islam's origins in the 1990s when I read the 1977 book Hagarism, written by Patricia Crone and I believe Michael Cook. If I recall, it's been a while, they did not outright discount the existence of Muhammad, but they cast many doubts concerning Islam's traditional narrative. Since then, an array of authors and activists have picked up and amplified this theme, leading to the grand conclusion that Muhammad never existed, but was rather fabricated to give the Arab empire that conquered much of North Africa and the Middle East in the 7th century a hagiographical foundation story, the Umayyads. The name that appears to be most associated with and is spearheading the argument against Muhammad's existence nowadays is J. Smith, Dr. J. Smith, at least according to the emails I've been receiving and comments being made here on this channel. They often go something like this: "We really like what you've been saying about Islamic history, but you should stop talking about Muhammad because he really never existed. Please see the words of Dr. J. Smith." To be honest with you, from my first brush with it as a student in the 1990s, I've never been much interested in this Muhammad never existed argument, and we'll get into why. But I've decided to address it in this video for two important and related reasons. First, to shed light on why it is such a weak polemic against Islam, and if anything, serves only as a distraction. And two, in so doing, shedding light on the subtle and inner workings of history, to look essentially at the psychological and epistemological aspects of history, why humans believe what they believe about the past, which I think is fascinating and possibly instructive for you. Let's start with me laying out my personal beliefs concerning Muhammad, whether he existed or not. I believe in the bare-bone facts of his biography. I believe that sometime in the early 7th century, a man claiming to be a prophet arose in Arabia and became dominant through warfare. Why do I believe this? Because we have several remarkably early references to his existence, and all by non-Muslims. Let's begin with arguably the most important of all these, the Doctrina Jacobi, or Jacobi, which documents a dialogue that took place on July 13th, 634, a mere 2 years after Muhammad's death. Justice, one of the participants of this dialogue, writes that his brother Ibrahim, quote, wrote to me saying that a deceiving prophet appeared amidst the Saracens. Saracens means Arabs. Justice then says that his brother Abraham, who was at the time living near Arabia, referred the matter to an old Jewish scribe. What do you tell me, Lord and teacher, concerning the prophet who has appeared among the Saracens? Abraham asks the elderly gentleman. And the scribe told me with much groaning, continues Abraham, he is deceiving. This is now the elderly gentleman talking. He says, he is deceiving. For do prophets come with swords and chariot? Verily, these events of today are works of confusion. Afterwards, Abraham decided to investigate the matter personally. He writes, so I, Abraham, inquired and heard from those who had met him that there was no truth to be found in the so-called prophet, only the shedding of men's blood. He says also that he has the keys of paradise, which is incredible. Now, Muhammad is first mentioned by name in a Syriac fragment, also written around 634, again, 2 years after his death. Only scattered phrases are intelligible. It reads, quote, many villages were ravaged by the killing of Muhammad, and many people were slain and taken prisoner from Galilee to Beth. Some 10,000 other Christians were slaughtered in the vicinity of Damascus. The translators put in brackets to help make this more intelligible the following words so that it reads, quote, many villages and homes were ravaged by the killing of the followers of Muhammad, etc. Writing around 640, Thomas the Presbyter, a Syriac Christian, also confirms that, quote, there was a battle, he's probably referring to Ajnadin, between the Romans and the Arabs of Muhammad in Palestine, 12 miles east of Gaza. The Romans fled. Some 4,000 poor villagers of Palestine were killed there. The Arabs ravaged the whole region. They climbed the mountain of Mardon and killed many monks there in the monasteries of Kedara and Benata. The Coptic bishop, John of Niku, who was likely alive during the Muslim conquest of Egypt around 640, 641, refers to Islam as, quote, the detestable doctrine of the beast, that is, Muhammad. All these quotes I read to you come from these two books, and I'm sure there are other books, but these are the books that I have in my collection. The Expansion of the Early Islamic State, edited by Fred M. Donner, and Seeing Islam as Others Saw It, a survey and evaluation of Christian, Jewish, and Zoroastrian writings on early Islam by Robert G. Hoyland. Again, these are all very early and definitive references to Muhammad and a prophet in Arabia, dating from between 2 and 8 years from his death. That is amazingly early by the standards of history. And I'm not sure, but would be very curious to learn how the naysayers who claim Muhammad never existed get past such references. If you know, tell me in the comments.
I'll pause here. So if I picked up correctly, he made minimum of 4 arguments, right?
4 references to 4
Yeah.
documents that come from the 7th century and 8th century. Notice he could have done 15. There are 15 good references he could have used. He used 4. 3 of them are okay because they do reference to the word Muhammad. Notice not Muhammad. He's misstating that. That's the big problem. He's got the wrong Muhammad. Notice where every one of those places were that he read. In the Flyleaf, in the Thomas the Presbyter, in Joseph and Niku, and even the Doctrine Jacobi. Notice where they're all located. They're in Gaza, they're in Damascus, and they're in the Tayyaye, which is northern Iraq. Not one of those Muhammads came from Mecca, came from Arabia. Bingo. That's the first problem, okay? He hasn't looked to see, and this is something that Hoyland and Donner both made. When they wrote it, they wrote Muhammad there in the translation. That's the problem. The word is not Muhammad. There is no Muhammad. You can't have a written word called Muhammad in the 7th century, because in order to have the word Muhammad, you need to have 4 consonants, mim, ha, mim, dal, and you need to have 3 vowels, adama, afata, and afata. There were no vowels in the 7th century. So the 4 consonant would have existed, but how do you then pronounce mim, ha, mim, dal? Muhammad. Muhammad is a common name. It's not a name, though. It's a title. It's a title that's in our Old Testament in Hebrew. The same word, Muhammad, is in Hebrew 11 times. It was used by the Ugarites way back in 1400 BC. It was employed by the Christian church and the Jews in the 4th century AD. You have Ambrose, who says this Muhammad that you see in Song of Solomon 5:16, the altogether lovely one, is none other than the anointed one, because that's what Muhammad means. It means the praised one. It means altogether lovely. It means the anointed one. It means the Messiah. This Messiah, this Muhammad, is to be seen as Jesus Christ. So from the 4th century on, in Christian texts, it was used to refer to Jesus. There are many early church fathers that employ it. Let me just give you a few names. Let me come up here to my PowerPoint, because I'm going to jump all over the place on the PowerPoint. You have certainly, here, let's go right here. You have Origen, who is referring in the 3rd century. So we're talking about 3rd century AD. The Christian theologian interpret the Song of Solomon 5:16 passage as the unique scripture where the eschatological nuptials of Christ and his bride are present. That was picked up by St. Ambrose in the 4th century, and introducing the idea that the Song of Solomon passage 5:16 referenced to Muhammad, which is the Hebrew word. It's the same letters that we have in Arabic. Arabic comes from Aramaic, which comes from Hebrew. The same 4 letters, Mimha Mimdal, was to be considered a title for Jesus Christ, the Messiah. This was then picked up by St. Gregory of Elvira in 392, who died in 392. Also copied by St. John of Cassian, who died in 435. That's the 5th century. And St. Augustine. We all know about St. Augustine, who died in 5th century, all picked up this theme. Apollonius in the 7th century also do it. So by the 7th century, the term Muhammad was a common title for Jesus in the church in that part of the world. So we should not be surprised when we find it written in many places and at that time. But it's a title of the praised one, or the anointed one, or the Messiah. Now the Jews also picked this up. The Jews, by the 563, we have a inscription in 563 that, and I've got a picture of it, and you can see the word Muhammad there in the inscription, this rock inscription from Yemen, which in Sabbaic, which is their Arabic that's used there, the Sabbaic Arabic, it retranslated as Lord of the Jews by the Muhammad, by the praised one, by, in this case, the praised one, a title of endearment. So therefore, the term Muhammad was well known in that part of the world, and certainly at that time in the 7th century, but it was not pronounced Muhammad as Raymond's pronouncing it. That's how we pronounce it today, and he's imposing back onto that word his view of the man Muhammad, of the name Muhammad. You can't do that, not historically, and certainly not linguistically. So that's why there's a confusion here. And that's why he's starting from the premise that, there are so many references to Muhammad. No, they're not. There are many references to Muhammad. And they all are either in Gaza or way up in Damascus or over in northern Iraq. Not one of them is from Arabia, and not one of them is from Mecca. That's the big problem. So the second thing I would say is, if you're going to read a text, and this is where Donner got and Hoyland both made the mistake. If you're going to read a written text, then for heaven's sakes, translate it as it's written. Don't impose the word Muhammad on it. Keep it as Muhammad. Then say, well, then who is this Muhammad? You will find Muhammad on coins. You will find Muhammad on rock inscriptions. You will find Muhammads on documents by non-Christians and Jews and Christians. Why are we surprised that Muhammad, the title, is all over the place, but not the Muhammad of Islam? If it was the Muhammad of Islam, Hatun, you have to answer 4 things. If it is the Muhammad of Islam, if Raymond wants to say that these references are the Muhammad of Islam, number 1, he has to have the right name. It is not Muhammad, it is Muhammad. Get the right title. Number 2, that Muhammad has to be placed in Arabia, and more specifically in Mecca. That Muhammad has to come from Mecca in order to be the Muhammad of Islam. Because that Muhammad of Islam was born there and spent 52 years there. And that's why his entire life, except for 10 years, was in Mecca. If he's not from Mecca, I don't care what Muhammad you find or what Muhammad you find. If he's not from Mecca, he's not the Muhammad of Islam. Number 3, that Muhammad or that Muhammad has to have received the Quran, all 114 surahs, whereas none of these references that he's given, and none that he can find, talks about any Quran. And most importantly, that Muhammad has to be a Muslim belonging to the religion of Islam. There is no reference anywhere to anybody called a Muslim from Islam except for the last one, Nikyu. Notice the ones that he put at the very end. John of Nikyu. Now, let me tell you something about that John of Nikyu. John of Nikyu, the Coptic Christian bishop, who refers to the word Muslim, this detestable doctrine of the beast, this Muhammad, who is embraced the faith of Islam. He gave all those four. The problem is the earliest manuscript for this quote is from 1602 from an Ethiopic translation from the Arabic, which
What
was
is
your
what is the
Greek
date again?
translation.
What is the date again?
1602. 1602.
Okay.
That's the 7th century. The earliest manuscript we have for John of Nikyu is from the 17th century, 1602, which comes from a Ethiopic translation of a Greek translation. Therefore, it has nothing to do with the 7th century. So why is he using it? Because by the 17th century, Muhammad was well known. He was a Muslim, and yes, Islam was well understood. You cannot use 17th century material to introduce an idea in the 7th century when there is no other reference anywhere from that century for either Muslims or for Islam. Now, listen, there were many people there who were of Arab descendants because Arabia did include Jordan and Syria today and what is today Iraq. But what did they call themselves in the 7th century? They call themselves Hagarids, which means the line of Hagar. They call themselves Ishmaelite, which means, again, from the line of Hagar. They call them Muhajirun, which means the people of Hagar. Where they call themselves Hagarites, means the place of Hagar. These were all Ishmaelites. All of these people, these Arabs that are writing, the Umayyad dynasty was made up of mostly Ishmaelites. So it stands to reason that they used these terms to call themselves, and they were called Saracens by others who referred to them. Nowhere did they call themselves Muslim. And none of these places, none of these documents, except for the one of Nikyu, which comes from the 1600s, none of them refer to someone who's a Muslim or who's from Islam or who's from Mecca or who received the Quran. That's the problem.
Okay. So, would you be able to try and then see if you can put your PowerPoints in PDF and then send it to me? Because it will visually help people. You try that while I continue.
It's too big. It won't fit on my PowerPoint. My PowerPoint is
Even in the
it's
PDF?
82 slides long, and it's too big to go on. I'll send it to you by hightail.
Okay. Well, that means we won't able to see those PowerPoints. So, if you are trying to get references, please rewatch.
Okay, just say, people, it is all up online right now on Fender Films, and it's also on Calvi Cappuccino Hills. I put it up on Fender Films about 9 hours ago. The entire PowerPoint's up there. And they've done a slap-up job. They have 5 different cameras on me, and they put the PowerPoints next to me. So you can see slide by slide by slide by slide everything that I'm saying.
Okay. I was just concerned, like, if people are trying to take notes and trying to get the references, it makes it difficult, but it's good to know it's on your YouTube channel and people can check that out. Okay.
Fander Films, Pfander Films.
Yeah. Link to the Jay's channel is on the description. Please do check that out. So, I am gonna move forward with the video and then we take it from there. Are you okay?
Okay.
Now, to underscore just how important the aforementioned references to Muhammad are, and by way of comparison, keep in mind that we don't have anything written as early as between 2 and 8 years of Christ's lifetime. The earliest non-Christian references to Christ were written many decades following his crucifixion. Josephus, about 60 years, Pliny the Younger, about 79 years, and Tacitus, 83 years. Again, I find it amazing that whereas Christians rightfully cite Josephus, Pliny, and Tacitus as early proof of Christ's existence, the references to Muhammad, which objectively speaking are even more compelling, having been written much closer to their subject's lifetime, 2 years, not 60, are dismissed as irrelevant by those who would make him a figment of our imagination. Okay, there's another very important reason I believe a Muhammad figure existed. How else does one understand the Sunni-Shia divide of history?
Let me talk about this. Okay, can you see how that's been eradicated now by what we've just gone through? So he is not aware of the fact that every one of these references, though he claims are 2 years, even that's fascinating because that suggests that Muhammad was alive in 634 and 636. That's a problem in and of itself. Obviously, these cannot be Muhammad he's referring to. These are another Muhammad, another. So, of course, they're much earlier because the fact you'll find that there are even references that precede. He's only going to the ones that come after 632. Why doesn't he go to the ones that actually predate 632, which also are other Muhammads, like the 523 one that I showed or that I referred to? That's a whole 100 years before. There is the Muhammad. Is he going to say Muhammad existed in 523? Okay, so you have to be careful. Make sure you get the right Muhammad, because there are many Muhammads. There are many Muhammads, but they're not the name of individuals. They are titles. So he doesn't realize that. He's not aware of that because he doesn't study history. Though he calls himself a historian, interestingly, along this time in this video, you're going to see he didn't look at any of my videos. If you're not going to look at what we're claiming, then how can he know what to confront me with?
Yeah.
You have to make sure that you watch the videos to know what we're saying.
And also helpful to remember that people are not questioning, or Christians are not questioning whether a place called Jerusalem is existed, versus historians are questioning, was Mecca existed in first century of Hijrah, or like in 7th century. So there are like serious historical questions that Muslims needs to answer. Doesn't matter whether I think Muhammad is exist or not. I'm just saying there are holes in Islamic history that needs to be filled. And
You accepted that there is no reference. He's going to bring that up, by the way. He's going to say Mecca is not important. Hold on, we'll get to that.
well, tell that to Muhammad. Tell that to Saudi. Okay, let's continue. So, as you pointed out, Jay, if you want me to pause, just give me signal, and then I'll pause, and then we take it from there.
I'll give you this signal. Stop. Okay.
Okay, that looks like more. I'm gonna chop your head off, but okay.
That's what it means. Stop. Cut it. Cut.
Okay.
Oh, is that too close to home? Okay, then I'll just say, what do you want me to say?
No, it's okay. It's okay. Let's go.
Muhammad is a later fabrication meant to give credibility and a hagiographical veneer to the Arab conquerors of the Middle East and North Africa, the Umayyads. How does one understand the Sunni-Shia conflict, which revolves entirely around not just the existence of a prophet named Muhammad, but his very DNA? Following Muhammad's death in 632, two contending Muslim groups emerged and continue to exist. Sunnis, who represent the majority and who believe that any qualified candidate is eligible to becoming Muhammad's successor or caliph, and the Shias, the minority, who believe that only blood descendants of Muhammad could be his successors, particularly through his daughter Fatima and his first cousin Ali, namely Muhammad's grandsons Hassan and Hussein, and their progeny. For centuries, since around 680, Sunnis and Shias have been killing each other over this point. Now let me ask you, if there was no Muhammad, then there was no Fatima. And if there was no Fatima, there was no Hassan and no Hussein. So who are the Shias, and what is their gripe? What event gave rise to them? Did the Umayyad conspirators who concocted Muhammad also compel their own descendants to start butchering each other? And to what end exactly? It's again for all these reasons that, as far as I'm concerned, the bare-bone facts of Muhammad's biography, that a man claiming to be a prophet and promising paradise to his militant followers, are, by the standards of history, not to mention common sense, amply attested. Having said all that, I do not necessarily believe in those many details contained in the vast corpus of Islam scriptures, from Ibn Ishaq's Sirah or biography of Muhammad to the countless volumes of hadith, which Muslims believe contain the detailed doings and teachings of their prophet. These I obviously take with a grain of salt, meaning I have no idea whether they are true or false and can only judge their plausibility
can you stop here?
on an individual basis. That said,
okay, he's going on to another point now. Let's stick back with that Shia-Sunni divide. Absolutely important. And everybody asks this question. What are you going to do with the Sunni-Shia divide? It is so important because it's so important today. There again, you're taking a problem today and you're imposing it back on them, saying it had to have happened. Otherwise, how can you have this dispute as to who carries the mantle of the prophet? Is it his descendants or are the ulama, the leaders of Islam? And of course, the Arabs go with the leaders, and the Iranians or those who come from Iraq and Iran, they go with his descendants. It is a political problem. All right, that's the first problem. But notice this: where do we first hear about the Sunni-Shia divide? Where's the first place we hear about it? Not in the Sirah. We get it from the Hadith. We get it from al-Bukhari, and even al-Bukhari contradicts himself on this. So the first we even hear about Ali as Muhammad's choice is with Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 5, book 64, hadith number 4416. Also, it's referred to in Sahih Muslim, who comes after al-Bukhari, volume 44, hadith number 2404a. While the counter argument, that means the one that contradicts it, also comes from al-Bukhari, and that is in volume 5, book 64, hadith 4459. All of this is on my PowerPoint. So even within al-Bukhari, you get completely conflicting references as to what this divide is about. Remember that the canonical version of al-Bukhari that we have today, where this whole argument is introduced, was not written until the 14th and 15th century. Are you listening to me? That is 13 to 1400 AD. We don't have anything earlier than this on any extant manuscripts. And I go through all the extant manuscripts on my talk. And you're going to see when you talk about the Sunni Shiite divide, you have to go to al-Bukhari. Al-Bukhari was not even writing this in the 9th century because we have nothing from al-Bukhari or Sahih Muslim or Ibn Dawud or Tirmidhi or Nisai or Majah or Ibn Hisham or al-Waqidi or al-Tabari. Any of these major traditional writers, we have nothing from the 9th and 10th century. They only begin to appear from the 11th century up until the 16th century. That's 400 to 900 years after these events supposedly took place. So that's the first problem. They're way, way too late. What's more, it is a political problem that was taking place during the Abbasid and during the Ottoman era. That's why this came up. Are it the Arabs or the Persians who are going to be in the rightful era of Muhammad? So this is a political problem that had to be disputed and had to be eradicated and had to be canonized and solidified in law. In order to get it solidified in law, they had to redact it back to a guy named al-Bukhari, who redacts it back to a guy named Muhammad in the 7th century. In other words, you've got to have a 7th century founding for this in order to give authority for the 14th and 15th century disputation. That's what's going on here. And this happens all the time, Hatu. You have enormous amount of documentation that comes up much, much later, then it's redacted back. Now, can you understand why we don't have any documentation from the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th until the 11th century? It was all destroyed and replaced, accreted and deleted by each political entity that wanted to bring their authority in, their laws and institutions. In order to do that, you got to have Muhammad quoting this. You got to have Muhammad introducing this. You got to have Muhammad's family being part of this argument. And that's why it makes sense. A political argument like this, of this nature, would have happened much later when it was needed by those who needed it. Now, you could have, listen, this happens all, I mean, let me give you, off the top of my head, look at the King Arthur legend, a perfectly normal legend. How many people believe that there was a man named King Arthur who actually was king of England, had a round table, had a wife named Guinevere, had all these 12 knights, one of them being Lancelot, who had an affair with his wife Guinevere, and then who went as a child and took a sword out of a stone in order to give him authority. Do you really believe that story? That's legend. But you ask anybody, especially you ask King Arthur. King Henry. Let me just get this right. If you look in British history, if you ask King Henry the 8th or King Henry the 7th, if that was legend, they based their whole lineage on being king of England on the fact that King Arthur existed. Yet we now know it's totally legendary. So even in England, the whole royalty is based on a legend that never really happened. If this happened much later in this case, the 16th century, we can see this going on. Why are we surprised that this also happens in the 14th and 15th century with Islam? In order to give authority to who you are and what your authority is, you've got to go back to Muhammad himself, and you've got to have the story that's there. That's all that's going on here. So that's easy to understand that because it's even happening even now today. Even today, Walt Disney has taken that legend and has introduced the problem with Merlin and whole Merlin, who is becoming the wise man behind Arthur. And also the stone, the sword in the stone was introduced by Walt Disney as well. So that legend still being created. Or look at Robin Hood. There are so many things like that. Look at the Mormons and Joseph Smith. My name, Joseph Smith, with the golden glasses. I've got golden glasses on. Do you really believe that he had a pair of golden glasses, that he found this revelation that changed the world? No. So you can see legends always take authority and give authority to the person that's there. And the legends, the more specific they are about who that person is and who the person that needs that legend to give authority for themselves, the more legendary it is, the more fictitious it is. And even in this case, to support, as Raymond is saying, that we can trust al-Bukhari for this legend, he puts it at 9th and 10th century. It's not 9th and 10th century, it's 14th and 15th century. Okay?
So, just on question as well as like addition to what you are saying, how about even though Shiites and Sunnis disagree regarding the biography of Muhammad, so there is like huge in-house debates and discussions. They are murdering one another. Shiites Muslim do not match with the Shiites Muhammad, do not match with the Sunnis Muhammad. Sunnis Muhammad does not match with the Shiites Muhammad. Would you kind of think from that, or there was enough time for them to reconstruct the kind of reconstruct the succession of Muhammad or history, putting it together. It's not a kind of one settled event, but as the time went on, they kind of try to put things together as like it was centuries after.
Absolutely. And you've just answered your question. Look at the date that we have this whole Shia divide introduced. The Shia Sunni divide is introduced in the 15th century. That's 900 years. Would you suggest, Hatun, that 900 years is enough time for this introduction and then sophistication and then accretions and deletion to finally be finalized and canonized in the 14th and 15th century? I would suggest 900 years is perfect.
More than enough, I would say. More than enough.
And interestingly, it's your ancestors that did it. Your ancestors, the Ottomans, are the ones that introduced the Sunni Shiite divide. I'm not going to say you're responsible for Hatun, but it is Turkey and it is the Ottoman Empire that actually introduced this because they needed it, because they were not the direct descendants of Muhammad.
I don't like getting the blame for everything on Turks. Yes, we created the Quran, we put the Hafs Quran together. Yes, we went to different countries, conquer them, and share life with all those kind of things. Just like
you controlled Islam for 900 years. You better take some blame for it, because much of what we know of Islam today comes from the Ottoman era.
Okay, so let me continue with the video. Where is it?
And while we're at it, it's worth mentioning that the hadith actually do help verify the existence of Muhammad, even if indirectly. For those who don't know, the hadith, ahadith in Arabic plural, are vast collections of what Muhammad reportedly said or did as passed down orally. Because they were finally written down between 120 to 250 years following Muhammad's death, those now raising questions concerning his existence dismiss them as being too late and therefore obvious forgeries. Ironically, however, much of what they do contain is very unflattering to Muhammad. Now, if they are fake and meant to help fabricate a heroic-like and noble prophet to validate the Arab Empire, shouldn't they only contain information designed to make Muhammad appear in the best of lights? Instead, they contain many oddities, putting it mildly, that have for centuries challenged the faith of Muslims, not a few of whom till this very day cite them as cause for their apostasy from Islam. Off the top of my head, for example, there's one canonical hadith, meaning its authenticity has been confirmed by the ulama, where Muhammad recommends that women breastfeed strange men as a way of...
Can we stop a moment?
Whom the women...
Okay, he's bringing up two different questions here. Let's deal with the first one before we get into this, because the one he's getting to now is very important. That's the embarrassment, the argument of embarrassment. This argument that he's saying that just because it's 200 to 300 years, it's not that important. We can understand it, that we can trust 200 to 300 years. That's written down 200 to 300 years. I spent about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes on Sunday going through and showing that this idea that the traditions come from the 9th and 10th century is completely bogus. Because we don't, unlike the same problem we've been having with the Quran, we can't find any manuscripts for the Quran from the 7th century, any full manuscripts, and even the ones from the 8th and 9th century are not complete, and they disagree with each other, and they disagree with the Quran we have today. The same problem exists for the traditions, and this is something we've not touched before. Now, we've been working on this for 2 years. Dr. Pat Andrews is the one that has done most of the work on this. And you know Dr. Pat Andrews, and he is an amazing researcher. And he has taken 2 years to find and hunt down all of these extant, we call extant manuscripts. These are manuscripts that actually, you can go ahead and stop sharing his screen for a moment, because I just want to talk to you on this. So he has gone through and shared these and found the dates for all these extant manuscripts. That means he's gone to the Sirah. Now, the Sirah is, obviously, we know the Sirah is from Ibn Hisham and al-Waqidi. We've been told that. That's 9th century. What he has found is the Sirah doesn't begin to appear until the 11th, until there is a document, a manuscript that was written in, I want to get this right, 1063, that is in Fez, Morocco. That's the earliest Sirah that we can find. That's the 11th century. Another one is found in the British Library from the 13th century. Another one's found in the Bodleian Library in Oxford. That is for the 14th century, along with another one found in Chester Beatty in Dublin. That's 14th century. The BNF Library one is 15th century. That's the Bibliothèque Nationale de Paris. And then the most important one is the one here in the SOAS Library there in London, which is from 1589. That's the 16th century. There are 6 manuscripts that contain the Sirah of Muhammad. They were all looked at, and they were all every one of them read by a German scholar called Dr. Dr. Heinrich Ferdinand Wustenfeld between 1858 and 1860. So we're talking about 160 years ago. He took those 6 manuscripts. He went to each one of them and compared and pulled out what he liked and threw away what he didn't. For instance, the first one, the Fez manuscript, which is from 1063, he only used 25% of. He threw out 75% because he thought it was fraudulent. How did he come to that criteria? Well, obviously, someone needs to answer that question. No one has done that. Nonetheless, he got most of his material from the last one, the latest one, which is the 1589 manuscript, and he put it together in that 2-year period and published it in 1860. And that is the biography we're all using today. That's the one you have to use. That's the one everybody has to use because it's the only one that's out in print. Now, it has been translated into many other languages. There has been there have been about 20 other other biographies that have written from these other manuscripts. The most famous is one by Sezgin, who put his together just from the Fez manuscript and came out with that in 1967. But who reads it? I don't know of anybody that reads it because it's so different than the one that Wustenfeld gives us. So can you see when he says that we have this guy in history, we know exactly what he did. How is it that the earliest we can find out what he did doesn't come to the 11th century? And that much of what we use today for what he did comes from a German scholar, 2 German scholars actually, one Sezgin and the other one Wustenfeld from the 1800s. Redacted back to these 6 manuscripts that come from the 11th century, from the 13th, 14th, and the 16th century. 5 of them are in Europe. 1 of them is in Morocco. You can go still see them today. Why aren't people reading those original manuscripts and coming up with 6 different biographies that are all contradictory? We don't do that because Muslims don't want us to do that, but we could. So this idea that we know what Muhammad did, we have no idea what he did, not until he was actually created or put together or was canonized. I use the word canonized in the 11th century up until the 16th century, and then finally the canonical form that was given to us in 1860. That's the 19th century. That's just 160 years ago. So the Muhammad that Raymond's talking about is from a German scholar who wrote it up in a 2-year period only 160 years ago. How can he say this guy is historically credible?
I just want to kind of point out something. It might be beneficial for the audience. If you think about it, like even 150 years to 200 years, let alone Jay is talking here about like 700 years time gap between between person the event put it together. If you think about it, like that is very, very long time to just simply corrupt, destroy, and invent new person. That's helpful to kind of think that timeline. Like Jay's giving those numbers, he speaks very fast, but like think about those dates, think about those numbers. It is very easy to put together brand new person. That's like, and make up stories for the person you want to do. There is nothing, no way you can go back and check those things.
Okay, we can, and this is why somebody who's listening, if you could do this is a doctoral thesis waiting to be done. Why doesn't one of you who's listening right now, who has a master's degree, go ahead and do a doctorate comparing those 6 manuscripts? Because notice the dates on those 6 manuscripts: 11th century, 12th century, 13th, 14th, and 16th century. This is not somebody that's been created in the 11th century. He has been manipulated and changed and accreted and deleted. So finally, we get the finalized person of who this Muhammad is by the 16th century. That is 500 years of accretions. Do you see what I'm saying? That's a doctorate right there ready to be done. The fact that it begins in the 11th century and still continues to be changed and changed and changed. And that's why it took a German scholar to try to put it together in the 19th century. To me, why hasn't anybody looked at this before? Mainly because Muslims will not do this work. We have to do it for them.
So it shouldn't be so complicated for someone to just turn up to Morocco and then express or get the manuscripts from Morocco, copy of it, and then just go through and then tell us what is inside it, how much it is different from the current biography of Muhammad.
It's already been done. Sezgin did that. Sezgin has done this in 1967. Compared Sezgin with the Bodleian manuscript, with the SOAS manuscript, with the British Library manuscript, with the Dublin manuscript, and with the with the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. 5 of them are in Europe. They're all there. Anybody can go to them. They don't seclude them. They don't keep you away from them. Therefore, it's all there for someone to do. We just need someone to do it.
Okay.
And also keep it in the sequence of 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and let's see how Muhammad changes in those 500 years.
Yeah.
No longer need cover themselves around. The Sirah also has Muhammad engaging
So that was, let me just go a few seconds back.
Okay, now he's coming into the embarrassment. This is a good one. I like this one. I love what he's doing here. But let me show you how this is something that David Wood done. This is something that you have done, Hatun, and that is how embarrassing Muhammad is. How could they have written it? I'm going to shut that one down very quickly. So go ahead, let him speak.
Islam. Off the top of my head, for example, there's one canonical hadith, meaning its authenticity has been confirmed by the ulama, where Muhammad recommends that women breastfeed estranged men as a way of making them family members, whom the women no longer need cover themselves around. The Sirah also has Muhammad engaging in deception, ordering the brutal assassination of old men, mothers, for simply mocking him, and marrying the wives of men he had or were killed on the field of battle. Such accounts have a ring of truth to them, not only because accurate accounts of historical figures will at least occasionally show some of their warts, but what we know about Muhammad from the earliest sources, a propensity for war, vengeance, and sexual licentiousness, further confirm the unflattering accounts of the Sirah and Hadith. So much for why I believe a Muhammad figure existed. In another video, we'll evaluate the counter-arguments against Muhammad's existence. In the meantime...
Okay, that's kind of it.
Okay, so here's what he's saying. He is so embarrassing, which is true. You have spent much of your career talking about all those embarrassing things about Muhammad, right? Much of what your videos are is just on that subject. Same with David Wood, same with Sam Shaboon, same with me. I did that for 30 years. I said, what great material this is. This is terrific, because he is so embarrassing to us. But why is he so embarrassing to us, Hatun? Because we're looking at Muhammad through the grid of Jesus Christ. We're thinking that he has to be like Jesus because he is our model. And we're assuming that Muslims do the same thing we do. They do not. They do not look at Muhammad through the grid of Jesus Christ. Muslims look through Muhammad as the paradigm, as the person that they have been brought up to love and cherish, and who they want to follow. So when you see Muhammad being violent, and Muhammad taking over and shutting down people and raping women and taking them as the wives of the Jewish men and then marrying them the same day. When you see him doing these things, most of the Muslims I talk to, when I bring them up, say, "Ura, that's our Muhammad." Yes, that's what we want, a man of God to be like. We want a warrior. We want a leader. We want somebody who is victorious. And then when you see him doing all these crazy things like having depression or attempted suicide or demon possessed or even cross-dressing or having homosexual proclivity, which Raymond's going on to all the time now on his channel, look at them and say, that is true. He had these are called typical crises of any prophet. Every prophet goes through these crises. But does he let the crisis control him, or does he come back and control the crisis? He did not continue to be depressed. He completely conquered that depression. He did not commit suicide. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any Muhammad. And as far as demon possession, he was able to conquer those demons, cross-dressing and homosexual tendencies. That was what he did, but he never stopped that, because look at all the women he had. So everything they're bringing up, when I talk to Muslims about this, and I've done this for 30 years, so I know what Raymond's talking about, the Muslims would come right back on me and say, "Thank you. That's the prophet we want. What about your Jesus? Let's look at your Jesus." Jesus never got married. He had no children. He had no family. He never owned anything. He never ruled any empire. He never was in a battle. He never was conquered any other defeat. He was nothing more than a wimp. Why should I follow him? Because he's not practical for me. So they could take the same argument and throw it right back in our laps. And they do. They say, I would much rather follow Muhammad because he is much more of a leader to me. He is much more of a model to me. He is something I want to follow. Jesus, you have to be a woman to follow Jesus, is what they tell me. So what Raymond's saying here, he is embarrassing, but he's embarrassing to Christians because we want Jesus to be our model. And I love who Jesus is. And that's why we have to be careful with this argument of embarrassment. It is embarrassing. He is embarrassing to us, but he's not embarrassing to Muslims.
Okay, so he made like lots of points. Anything else you want to add on so far what he said before I move to his rebuttals on your findings, your research?
Okay, do you mean the second video?
Yeah, second video.
Yeah, just go to the second video.
Okay. Let me.
Okay, but do you want to come back to me on any of that, because I'm also confronting you on this as well.
You are not confronting me, Jay. I'm just trying to provide people different views so people can use. When I meet with Muslim, wherever they stand, I'll go for their
Hunter, come
stand.
back on me, because I'm confronting you on this idea that it's so good to use all these embarrassing facts against him.
I am more worried about there are individuals who are following Muhammad, the one they believe, and it's taking them to hell. Therefore, they are desperately need Lord Jesus Christ. So that's where I stand.
Okay. I'm going to quote you on that at the very end, because I'm going to show you how weak an argument that is.
Great. And then I'll put on your face over 1,000 converts who are just like walking out of Islam.
Oh, I agree. You have thousands of converts who do that.
It is depend on where the individual stands. So if they want to make their case why today they are Muslim because Quran is historically reliable, then I'll take it from there. If they want to make their case that 7th century Muhammad is the perfect example, then I take it from there.
Okay. And somebody, we're jumping to the end of this talk. Let's hold off on this till the end of the talk.
Meantime, let me just say quick thank you to a couple of people for their super chat and for their generosity. Thank you very much for your generosity, Mushi. RFB79, thank you very much. Islam is satanic. That is an insult to Satan, but I'll let that go. Diamond, thank you. Allah is humble, the moon god. Moon is classified by CIA and NASA for with.
I think that's tongue in cheek. I'm not sure they're being serious, but
They might be serious because the person is kind of 3 times left the comment. Humbal throne is Mecca, has from Anderson star system, and then there's
Andromeda
another
string.
one. Allah is an angel, aka extra terrestrial. Do you want to make any comment on?
No, these are all these traditions that are found. These are all these references to Hubal. Earliest mention of Prophet Muhammad from the Muslim sources only a few years after his death. Mahmoud, you didn't even listen to what we said. It's not Muhammad, it's Muhammad.
I'm assuming that gentleman arrived a little bit later. So
he didn't hear what Muhammad. There's no reference to Muhammad. And I'll just say, Mahmoud, your name itself does not make any sense in the 7th century because there is no vowels to make your name. Okay, go back and see the first part of this. We already covered this.
Okay, then let me bring our attention to the second video, which was presented by Raymond Ibrahim. Why are Muslim laws? This one. Let's go for it.
In a recent video, we looked at why I believe that Muhammad existed, even though some in the West insist he is a later fabrication created to provide the Arab Empire with a hagiographical founding story. I essentially offered 3 arguments. 1, there are very early non-Muslim references to Muhammad, the oldest of which is only 2 years after his death. By way of comparison, the earliest non-Christian reference to Jesus Christ is about 60 years after his crucifixion. 2, if no Muhammad existed, then no descendants of Muhammad existed either. So how can we understand the Shia, who have been fighting and warring against the Sunnis since the 7th century, on the claim that only Muhammad's descendants can lead the Muslim world as caliphs? 3, although the hadith was written down between 120 to 250 years following Muhammad's death, hence why those who claim Muhammad never existed dismiss them as unreliable, they do not behave the way one would expect forgeries to behave, namely by presenting Muhammad in glowing terms. Rather, they show him with all his warts, to the point that countless Muslims over the centuries have left Islam primarily because of the way Muhammad is depicted in the hadith. So what kind of forgeries meant to help Islam's founding story are these? So much for why I believe a Muhammad figure existed. Now let's turn to and evaluate the counter-arguments against his existence. There's only one problem. I don't know any of them, nor do I care to know any of them, nor do I need to know any of them to dismiss them. Why, you may ask? Because I do know one thing. Without hearing any of them, I already know none of them can, by their very nature, be conclusive. None of them can be incontrovertible, incontestable, or irrefutable. And this is really the grand point I'd like to make here. There is nothing in pre-modern history, certainly when it comes to people and events that are 14 centuries old, such as Muhammad and Islam, that can be proven or disproven. It's simply impossible. Sure, one can make arguments, but arguments are not incontrovertible proof. And short of that, short of concrete, irrefutable proof, people will always believe whatever is most emotionally satisfying to them or fits their needs. To be clear, I'm not saying that the arguments against Muhammad's existence are wrong. For all I know, they may be right. Maybe Muhammad never existed. Rather, what I am saying is that they cannot be proven one way or another on a scientific level as pure objective facts that must be acknowledged by those who would count themselves among rational human beings. There will always be room for another interpretation.
Rational human beings. Yes.
Okay, this is an important. I mean, what he's bringing up is I mean, no one would dismiss what he's bringing up here. Of course, you can't prove irrevocably that Muhammad did not exist. But can you see how stupid that sounds? How can anybody prove someone did not exist? What the problem is the other way around. It's his claim that he did exist. Therefore, the onus is on him, not on me. I don't have to prove a thing. So that's why is he putting that onto my shoulders and saying you can't prove he didn't exist? Well, I can certainly prove that he didn't exist, but just by certainly showing that nothing's there. What I'm going to ask him now is, you prove to me that he did exist, which means he's got to show me, like I said at the very beginning, someone named Muhammad with the vowels in the 7th century who lived first and foremost in Mecca. That's the big problem right there. He's going to come up to this later on in this video. And who received a book with 114 surahs called the Quran, and who referred to himself as a Muslim belonging to the religion of Islam. Those are the things I'm going to demand of him. So he now has the onus on him to prove historically that this man existed. He has to at least show me one of those 5 or all 5. Otherwise, I'm going to have to shake my head and say, I'm sorry. You got the wrong Muhammad or the wrong Muhammad, who does not come from Mecca, never received a Quran. Even the Quran itself, the fact that he can't come up with a Quran from that century, a complete Quran, the fact that he can't come up from a place called Mecca from that century, and he can't come up from someone named Muhammad that far south. All the Muhammads that he's referring to are up in the north. So already, I would say, historically speaking, he has the onus on him to prove Muhammad existed. I don't have to say a thing about his non-existence because you can't prove something that didn't exist. Bingo. Do you get that?
Yeah, I heard you. So I don't know if this is troll or not, but just like what are your thoughts on if Muhammad did not exist, who led his army, Jay?
Which army are you referring to, and what? That's the great thing. Look at the ones he did talk about. The Battle of Yarmouk. Look and see where Yarmouk is. It's in southern Syria. Did Muhammad ever go to southern Syria and lead an army of 15,000 Jews alongside him? Where are these 50,000 Jews that Muhammad had in his army fighting the Byzantines? See, that's completely fictitious. Look at any Jewish crime. Look at any reference from the 7th century of anybody leading 15,000 Jews along with the Arabs against the Byzantines. That didn't exist. So where are all these battles? Here's another doctrine ready to be done. Are you ready? We need someone to go to the Maghazi documents, which are written by Al-Waqidi, look at every one of those battles and place them on a map and show where any of them can be seen as, can be known as legitimate. I'd like to know if any of those battles existed, because they're all too far south. They're all in and around Mecca and Medina. All these places where these battles are supposedly happen in and around Mecca and Medina. A few happen up as far as Tabuk, but no farther than Tabuk. And none of them happen in what is today Jordan or Syria or in Iraq. None of them. So you've got a problem here. Somebody needs to write this up. And that's why, like Badr the Bravery and the Uhud battle, are you saying that there was a Badr battle and there is a Uhud battle? Can you show me where those battles are listed or where they're referenced anywhere outside of the traditions which come from the 11th, 14th, and 15th century? So you can see how this tradition about Muhammad, once you have a prophet named Muhammad, once you have a prophet who is in contradistinction to the other prophets that come in the line of Isaac, because remember, the prophetic line of Ishmael just doesn't exist. They've got to have a prophet in that line. That's why the Ishmaelites are so important. It's so need to have a prophet who's from the Ishmaelite line. Let's go ahead and put this down so I can show you what I'm talking about.
Are you able to share your screen?
No, that's all I need, so you can see what we're talking about. Rather than having Raymond there, I'm talking to these people who are responding to this question. If you have these battles, and if you have that man who's down there in Uhud or Badr, that's the two battles that are talked about. First and foremost, where do you think Badr comes from? Badr is actually a mountain that's way up in Syria, up near Damascus. So that Badr is actually been interposed and reinterposed down to what is today Mecca. And the same thing you can see of so much of what's in Mecca today. Much of what's in Mecca today, like the 5 stages of the Hajj, all come from Jerusalem, or I should say the majority of those stages come from Jerusalem, almost exactly like what they did in Jerusalem, circumambulating 7 times counterclockwise. They did that in Jerusalem in the 1st century when the temple was still there. And the reason why is because of Jericho. They were called to do that. That's what God said to do in Jericho. That now is being reproduced down in Mecca. The Kaaba, the square building that they circumambulate, the word Kaaba means cube. It means that in Arabic. It also means that in Hebrew. It's the same word that is used for the temple, the Holy of Holies, as the Kaaba in Jerusalem. Then they run back and forth between Marwa and Safa. Why do they run back between these 2 mountains? They're supposed to be mountains. Where Hagar is supposedly looking for water, they're not mountains. They're only about 20 feet high. They're just rocks. Those are obviously not the original mountains. They are facsimiles of the original Marwa and the original Safa, which are in Jerusalem. Marwa is Mount Moriah. Safa is Mount Scopus. The Kidron Valley is in between, and that's where the pilgrims would go from Moriah, where the Temple Mount is, where the Dome of the Rock stands today, go down to Kidron Valley and come back up to Mount Scopus. The Arabic translation for Moriah and Scopus is Marwa and Safa. Josephus refers to this in the 2nd century and gives the Arabic names. So that's why it's now reproduced down in Mecca in a facsimile form, in a much more smaller form, much like we do when if you go to Las Vegas, you'll see the Eiffel Tower there and you'll see the pyramids, but they're not the original Eiffel Tower nor the original pyramids. They're just facsimiles, small models of what is the original. That's why much of everything you see in Mecca today has come from much further north, in many cases from Jerusalem. Okay?
Okay, let me continue.
Hatun, feel free to come back to me with me on anything I'm saying.
It's great that we are not debating, Jay. I'm hosting you to learn from you, so everyone can learn and then kind of make their stand where they stand on this. It's good. It's good.
For a counterclaim. Why? Because it's history, literally, and we can't go back in time to prove what really did and did not happen. Let's, for example, look at what appears to be one of the main arguments against Muhammad's existence. And I know this because many of those people telling me to consult the works of Dr. J. Smith mention it. If I rightly understood it, it's the claim that there are no early records or archaeological evidence for Mecca, even though Mecca is obviously pivotal for Muhammad's existence. No Mecca, no Muhammad. My first reaction to this is the famous dictum: absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because we don't possess the evidence for something does not mean it never existed. What if Mecca was once on dozens of ancient maps, all of which are now, like most of history, lost? Is there proof that that cannot be the case? No, by nature there is no such proof. The opposite argument is also true. There are probably many civilizations and important people that we've never even heard of. Can you, for example, imagine how different our understanding of the past would be? How utterly bizarre history might seem if the Great Library of Alexandria and its world-changing contents weren't torched? At any rate, the argument against Mecca's existence kind of reminds me of the ancient city of Troy from Homer's epic, the Iliad, with Achilles, Hector, Helen, etc. For centuries, all serious scholars and archaeologists maintained that Troy was purely mythological, that it never existed except as a make-believe stage for Homer's Iliad. Then, in the late 1800s, nearly 3,000 years after the recorded sacking of Troy, an amateur archaeologist, Heinrich Schliemann, found it in modern-day Turkey. This is a perfect example of how absence of evidence was never evidence of absence. But just to show you how nebulous the discipline of history truly is, when I first heard about Schliemann's discovery of Troy in a classics course I took back in the 90s, all I remember thinking about then is, how do we know what he found was Troy? How do we know it wasn't another perhaps wholly unknown or forgotten civilization? Such is the messiness of history. All this leads to my other main point, why the Muhammad never existed claim
Okay.
is very...
Okay. Now, can you see how weak an argument that is? Let's go ahead and stop sharing him.
Absence of...
This is one of the weakest of arguments in his 2 videos. Let me tell you why. The absence of evidence does not prove the evidence of absence. Listen, this is what Dr. Jamal Badawi said in my debate in 1995. 30 years ago, I got the same response from Dr. Jamal Badawi after I gave 10 historical problems with Muhammad and with early Islam, all taken from Dr. Patricia Krone, who is the one that shut down Mecca. And I went to her the week before, and we spent 3 hours, she and I, putting together this debate. And his only response was, "You're just speaking from silence. We can't find any reference to it. Therefore, it's just a matter of argument of silence, and the absence of evidence doesn't prove the evidence of absence." Now, here is Raymond bringing this up again, but he's completely missed the plot. No one's mentioning the fact that we can't find Mecca. It's the other way around. What we're saying is we can't find any reference to Mecca. How can he use the example of Troy? Troy, the reason why it was such a mystery is because everybody talked about Troy, or the city of Ur for Abraham. Everybody's known that this existed, but we can't find it. Or the city of Atlantis. There are a lot of mysteries that people refer to about cities that are great cities that we've not yet been able to find. In this case, we can't even find any reference to Mecca. That's the problem. It's just the other way around. He's completely confused the two.
So
It's the fact that no reference for Mecca is found anywhere. We now know where Mecca is today because of the fact you can go there. But there is no reference to a city called Mecca prior to 741. That's the 8th century. And that Mecca, the Continuato Byzantia Arabica, places that Mecca way up in southern Turkey in the wrong location. As far as maps are concerned, there were no maps in the 7th century. Maps were only created about the 10th century, no, about 900. What we do go to is writings like Ptolemy's writing of geography of Arabia. He writes an entire geography of Arabia, listing all the known cities and hamlets and oases and rivers and mountains. He doesn't place them on a map because they didn't have maps that early. And when you look at everything that Ptolemy says in the 2nd century, this is long before Islam, there is no reference to Mecca in any of his writings. So that's what we're saying. We just can't find any reference. Don't worry about whether Mecca is there today. We can't find any reference to Mecca. And here's the problem that Raymond's not taking into consideration. Islam, in its traditions, suggests that Mecca was there from before the time of Adam and Eve. In chapter 7 of the Quran, verse 26, they're thrown out of the Garden of Eden down to earth. It's Al-Bukhari that says where they were thrown to. They were thrown down to Mecca. Also in the Sirah of Ibn Hisham, which we now know is 15th century, stipulates that Eve was thrown to Mecca and Adam was thrown down to Sri Lanka. Don't worry, he was tall enough. He was 90 meters tall. He went boom, 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 and joined his wife up there in Mecca. So Mecca should be there. It should be the oldest city in history because you don't get any older than Adam and Eve. In order to have a city, you have to have people, right? Then you have to get to what Dr. Patricia Corona did. And I don't think he's ever read, really. He mentioned Hagerism. He didn't read the 1987 book called Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam. That's the book that shut down Mecca. And it's been around for over almost 30 years now. In that book, she went back and I remember who she is. She reads and writes 15 languages, all archaic languages. So she went to the original documents of all of these writings, and she read them in their original tongue. And she looked and she strove to find any people or any place or any civilization that would know about this city called Mecca. So she went to the Assyrians, she went to the Romans, she went to the Babylonians, she went to the Persians. No reference to Mecca at all in any of their writings. So she decided to go closer to Mecca. She went to the Nubians, which are across the Red Sea. She went to the Nabateans, which is up north. She went to the Himyarites. She went to the Asherites. All of these civilizations that surround what is Mecca today. No reference to any place called Mecca. So then she says, well, hold on a minute. It could be that Mecca was so insignificant, obviously, see how stupid that sounds, that maybe they forgot to write about it. So she said, let's look at the other places they're surrounding Mecca. Let's start with Aden and Sana and Najran and Taif and Yathrib and Khaybar and Tabuk and Gaza. Those are the major oases along the Western Plateau, all of them insignificant. Nonetheless, she was able to find reference after reference all the way back to the 4th century BC of every one of those places, but not one reference to the much greater, the much more important place called Mecca. When Raymond says this is just an insignificant place, he's not reading the traditions. It is not the most significant. It cannot be most insignificant if Adam and Eve were there. And look at chapter 21 of the Quran. Abraham is in Mecca, although it doesn't say Mecca. It just says the Masjid al-Haram, which is the forbidden place of bowing. Muslims claim that that's Mecca. If Abraham is in Mecca rebuilding the Kaaba with his son Ishmael in 1900 BC, then someone somewhere should have heard of this place. No one anywhere has ever heard of this place until the 8th century AD. So Raymond, come back to me on this. Where are you finding? Why is it you're even suggesting that the absence of evidence suggests the absence of evidence? Prove me evidence for Mecca. I'm going to throw it right back on your lap. It should be one of the greatest places in the history of mankind. Certainly the most historical, the oldest place in history. Show me one piece of evidence before the 8th century. And it would be even better before the 7th century, and even better before the 6th century, because that's when Muhammad was born there and spent 52 years there. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Sorry. Okay. Um, let me continue.
No, come back to me on that. Do you have any? Do you have? You're not coming back to me on anything, dude.
I told you I'm not having you here for the debate. I'm just having you here for responding, Raymond Ibrahim, and then take it from there.
I want you to debate me because
I am very much aware. Mecca does not meet with the information that traditional Islam provides for us. I'm very much aware of that. So I just want to people to hear, if they haven't watched Raymond Abraham's video, hear his response as well as kind of put together what
here's
you're saying.
here's the easiest rebuttal for Mecca. You ready? Look at a map, and what do you see? Look where Mecca is situated. It's in the middle of a desert. A desert, right? A desert means no water, no food, no people, no towns, no towns, cities. No cities, no history, no civilization. It's as simple as that. It takes me 5 seconds to say that. Once you've said that, in 5 seconds, you and I did this on a ladder. We did it back in 2019. I went through the same thing. No food, no water, no food, no people, no towns, cities, no history, no civilization. You've got to have water. You've got to have water in order to have vegetation for people to survive, for camels to exist. There is no water in Mecca. The only water are on those little oases called Taif and Yathrib and Khaybar and Tabuk. Those are all oases. They have water aquifers below them. That's why they're called oases. We have no reference to Mecca because there's no water there. Therefore, no one lived there. If there was no one living there, then how in the world do you get all these Jews and Christians living there, having these disputes in the Quran, these theological disputes with Muhammad, so that he could write them up in the Quran? The Quran makes no sense that far south because there were no Jews and Christians that far south. Everybody agrees with that. They didn't get any further south than Tabuk, which means even the Quran couldn't have been there. And you now see, look at the Quran, open its pages, read the Arabic in the Quran, and you will see that the Arabic in the Quran does not come from Mecca and Medina. It comes from Jordan. It's Nabatean Aramaic. It has the tar marbuta at the end. It has the alif maksura at the end of the word. It has the definite article, what we would call alif lam. That does not exist in any Arabic that would have come from Mecca Medina, because the people that from Mecca Medina, if they did exist, would have used Sabaic Arabic, which does not have the tar marbuta, does not have the alif maksura, does not have the definite article. That's why you have to place where this Quran comes from. This Quran could only have come from what is today Jordan or Syria or Iraq, not that far south. So without Mecca, then which Muhammad is Raymond talking about? If you take Mecca out of the picture, you no longer have the Muhammad of Islam. Okay, it's as simple as that.
She's been saying that for a while. She has not given any date. It's just going on. People say lots of things, brother.
Well, I mean, who is this Mary, and what has she done? And let me see what she's written. If she's someone of influence, if she's an academic, I'll debate her. But so far, I've not seen anybody of influence. And the people that always look at, hundreds of people want to debate me, but when you ask who they are and what they've done nothing. And they're just saying much the same thing of Raymond, what Raymond's saying here. That's why I like Raymond, because he's an academic. He actually is trying to shut me down academically. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, it's not only that. Like, Mary has been bringing up this for a while. I got in touch with her. I asked her for a date. I'm still waiting for a date. So it's just been going on, I don't know, almost a year or something. Anyway, so let me just continue to play. So before I was going to make a point. So am I right to assume? So while Raymond Ibrahim is talking about maybe it was another unknown civilization, there is nothing throughout history, there is nothing throughout liturgy sources indicates or supports such a claim that Mecca was another unknown or might be another unknown civilization.
I mean, located in a different place.
In current place, not in a different
place. No, there's nothing, no reference whatsoever for a Mecca existing in that place prior to the 8th century. Now, let me give you a caveat. We do have an inscription that's from 697 that refers to the Masjid al-Haram. The Masjid al-Haram would be the what today is the Kaaba, that square building. That's what Muslims claim. I'm not sure that I can claim that. And there's claiming that was where that was created in the about 60 years or about, it is 687, so roughly about 60 years after the Mecca of the fact of after Muhammad died. So possibly by 690, late 7th century, there could have been a Mecca. I don't have any problem with that, because the Abbasids, I mean the Umayyads, did have to have a sanctuary. They did, and they could not use Jerusalem anymore. So they had to find a place where they could go and a place, the forbidden place abound. So I have no doubt that possibly Mecca was chosen probably in the late 7th century.
What about Mecca is actually Petra? That's why Muslims are more fanatically
Okay, this is Dan Gibson's argument. It's a great argument. I don't think that that's good enough. I think Petra is nothing more than a copy of Jerusalem. That's why I would say, why stop with Petra? I don't have a difficulty with Jews being thrown out in 70 AD. That's true. In the 1st century, they were thrown out of Jerusalem, thrown out of Israel, and they went to the diaspora. And as they went to the diaspora, they took their scriptures with them in their scrolls, and they would then build their own temples. I have no problem with them, the ones who came down to Jordan, the Jews who came down to Jordan, as there were many at that time, because they were traders, and that was a center of trade at that period. And they would have built a temple there in Petra, and that temple would have looked very much like the Jerusalem temple. So that's not a difficulty, and that would explain then why so many of the Nabatean Qiblas are facing Petra, and then the Jewish synagogues that he has found are facing Jerusalem, because the Qiblas are not uniform. Some of them are towards Jerusalem, some of them are towards Petra. Those that were Nabatean would be Petra. That would make sense. Either the Nabateans themselves, or the Ishmaelites, or the Jews who were also traders would have been facing Petra. And then I would suggest that maybe it was the other Jews that wanted to have a face towards Jerusalem. Those Qiblas are facing Jerusalem. But notice what Dan did say, that we have no mosque, the Qibla of any mosque, facing Mecca until 715. The first mosque we've been able to find that faces Mecca is not till 715. That's the salient point. That's well into the 8th century. So that would make sense if then Mecca was then chosen as the sanctuary for the Ishmaelites. They would then have Mecca, all their mosques that they're building as traders, they would have then be facing Mecca after the 8th century. But again, that's long after Muhammad was dead. That's almost a century later.
Okay, let's continue. When are you publishing the book, Jay?
We're writing it right now. It should be published hopefully this year.
Okay.
Weak, if not futile, polemic against Islam. It comes down to this: because very little can be unequivocally proven or disproven in history, guess what? People, in this case Muslims, will always embrace, and justifiably so, the version that best suits their needs. In this case, that Muhammad existed. It's really as simple as that. Want proof? Guess who else even more scholars have for approximately 2 centuries, not just a few decades, been issuing academic book after academic book to prove that he never existed? Jesus Christ. Has the Christian world been rocked? Has Christianity died out? Have you ever heard of a single person who went from being a practicing, observant Christian to apostatizing simply and only because they were convinced by academic arguments that Christ never existed? Yeah, me neither. By the way, and interestingly enough,
Stop here.
People will always.
This is really unacademic what he's just said. How can he say that? How can he say that no one's been convinced of Jesus' historicity when you look and see what happened in the 1800s, when the school in Tübingen and Wellhausen came out with his book saying that Jesus did not exist? Look and see what happened to the church in Europe. It decimated the church, that argument. The historical criticism decimated. I don't know how Raymond can make that claim if he's a historian. Look at the history of the church. It was because of historical criticism and because of Darwinianism that by 1905, the entire church in Europe was decimated and has not recovered. Not in Europe. It's recovered in America and other parts of the world, mainly because we've answered every one of those questions. But it's taken us 100 years to answer every one of those criticisms. So be careful, Raymond. Do not, either he's just not looking at history or he's not even aware of his own Christian historical findings. It was one of the greatest decimations of the church in the history of the church. We've never had that strong of attrition of people leaving the church, almost entirely because of historical criticism. That's why I'm saying this is an enormous damaging criticism. Now, let's be careful. Back then, remember, they didn't have internet, they didn't have radio, they didn't have television. They only had this material coming in through the universities, and it started in Germany, and it permeated down into the seminaries, and from the seminaries, it permeated down to the churches, into the pews. And that's why it took about 30 to 40 years before this really decimated the church. Once it did decimate the church has never recovered. In Europe, Christians still, only about 5% go to church. Because, I mean, if you look at historically, you look at any historical person that says, what was it that decimated the church? From 90% down to 5%. why did 90% leave and only 5% retain? And they would say it's because of historical criticism. That is why so many Christians don't like historical criticism. It may be the reason why Raymond doesn't like it, because he is scared that this may happen again, that it would flip back and hit us again. No, it will not, because we've done our homework in the last 100 years. And that's why this redacted criticism, form criticism, textual criticism, source criticism, all these criticism that I'm using. In fact, I've been using them in this very talk that I did on Sunday. I use form, I use source, and I use textual criticism. These criticisms were matured on the Bible and on Jesus Christ. Were not invented by Christianity, but we were the one that matured them. You go ahead and knock them off just a minute. Can you then see why it's important that Raymond, if he's going to make these kind of claims, that this will not change anybody? He doesn't know anybody that's been changed by that. Either he's not reading history or he's not looking at his own antecedents. Our church was decimated because of historical criticism, and you can't walk away from that. But now, because we have been able to unpack these and undo and use them on the Bible and on Jesus Christ, we are able to respond to every one of these criticisms. What more so, taking the same criticism and applying them to Islam now. That's why we as Christians are the best suited to do so, because we understand it better than anybody else, because we've had it done against us and we've been able to come up with responses to it. But secondly, we are the only ones that when we use this criticism that he believes is invalid against Islam, we can provide an alternative. That when we shut down Muhammad, when we shut down Mecca, and we shut down the Quran, we can provide them Jerusalem, and we can provide them Jesus Christ, and we can provide them the gospel of Jesus Christ. We are the only ones that have an alternative to what we're criticizing. And we're doing it using the same apparatus that was thrown against us and decimated the church. So I don't know why Raymond's saying this. He doesn't know his own history. This has been by far the most damaging. But here's the difference. Whereas back in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, this took 30 to 40 years to permeate and make its way down to the pews. We now have YouTube. And we now have the internet. We have satellite. We have so much more. We have iPhones and all that. Can go so much quicker than they could way back in the 1900s, early 1900s. Therefore, we can shut down Islam so much faster than they could, and we have much better tools to do so than they had. And we are the only ones that have the response to it, and have the alternative, and have the answer. Come on home, Jesus Christ.
I think historical critique personally helps me with my faith in Christianity, because you look at the history. When Bible is silent, history steps in and then confirms, or when history is silent, Bible steps in and then confirms. It's very complementary to one another. Yet also I want to remind everyone, it's a historical fact that man called Jesus died on the cross by crucifixion.
Let's take that right there. Take that one right there.
Let me just finish. Was buried, and then today that grave is still empty. That's a historical fact. Yes.
Okay. Real quick. Islam shuts down that fact with one verse, chapter 4, verse 157.
40 Arabic words, yeah.
According to the Islam, there was no crucifixion, because they thought it was so. They thought another was given his image, for truly he was not crucified. That is the one verse, the only verse in the Quran that shuts down the crucifixion. Now, for those who are asking, if this is historical, who would you rather go to? That verse, one verse in the Quran, or would you rather go to people like who are right there? Why not go to the people who are in that part of the world and in that time? Let's go to Thales and Phlegon, who are two satirists who were debating that event in 52 AD, just 20 years after it happened, and referred to Jesus by name and mentioned that when he died, the earth shook and the sun went dark, like an eclipse that happened that night, that afternoon. That is within 20 years of Christ's death. So why don't you go to someone like the Roman historian Tacitus? Hated Christians, had nothing good to say about Christianity, but he was writing in the late first century, and he mentions the death of Jesus. He mentions that it happens under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius, showing that it would happen in 33 AD. That's why we know of the date itself, though he hated Christians. He also, why don't you go to the Jewish historian Josephus? Not only does he talk about the death of Jesus, he talks about the death of his brother James, and he mentions also that the Christians believe he rose from the dead. So here I've given you Greek, Roman, and Jewish historians from the 1st and 2nd century, who were there at the same time and who got it from the same place. They would be more historically viable than I would say the Quran, which has only one verse that completely contradicts itself, because even the Quran is confused on this notion. In chapter 19, verse 33, Jesus himself talks about it. Says, blessed be me, the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I rise again. So he refers to his death and resurrection. You can see the Quran coming and going. It gets confused on this point. I would therefore rather go to history itself. That's why historical criticism is absolutely important. When it comes to history, we have got the historians on our side. Islam has not one historian who is from that time period, the first century, or from that place, who actually was an eyewitness or got it from the eyewitnesses that Jesus did not die on that cross.
Okay, let me continue.
Only because they were convinced by academic arguments that Christ never existed? Yeah, me neither. By the way, and interestingly enough, my contention that people will always adopt those historical arguments that best suit their needs works both ways. If the followers of the prophet will simply shrug off the non-existence polemic without bothering to look into it, those who dislike or are hostile to the prophet will jump on it. For example, are you readily willing to look into and believe claims that Muhammad never existed because you are an objective seeker of truth? Or is it because you dislike and are happy to embrace any argument against Muhammad? That is because you don't like him, and the notion that he never existed is very satisfying in several levels. The simple way to answer this question is by asking another. For example, if you're a Christian, have you read and tried to grapple with all the many claims against Christ's existence, which by nature should be of far greater consequence to you than claims about this Muhammad? I bet you haven't. Indeed, I bet that if you ever heard that there were arguments against Christ's existence, you dismissed them in your mind as products of bitter atheists and anti-Christians looking to undermine the Christian faith. Arguments unworthy of your attention as a Christian. You may even, as I am now arguing, have instinctively concluded that whatever such arguments, none of them can be irrefutably proven, so why bother looking into them? If you thought any of that, I'm here to tell you that I agree. But I'm also here to tell you that whatever the reason for you as a Christian not being interested in, much less rocked by claims that Jesus never existed, are the same for Muslims when it comes to Muhammad, except times 10. Remember, whereas you may fancy yourself an objective person who is open to evaluating evidence from any, including non-Christian sources, for Muslims and non-Muslims are the de facto enemy who will never cease trying to destroy Islam. The Quran itself warns Muslims that, quote, never will the Jews or Christians be pleased with you until you follow their faith, end quote. That's 2:120. So when Christians and Jews come along and say, hey, you dumb Muslims, guess what? Your prophet never even existed. And considering all that I've already pointed out, including that such claims cannot be proven, how rocked by this assertion do you think Muslims really are? As an avid and longtime observer of Arabic and Islamic media, I can tell you that responses to the Muhammad is a myth claim veer between indifference to mockery. Muslims either ignore or laugh at it, the very same way Christians ignore or laugh at the Jesus never existed claim. Again, you may say, but if Muslims only took the time to look into the arguments for Muhammad's non-existence, surely they would come around. To which again I respond, so why haven't you, a Christian, read and seriously evaluated the arguments and claims against Christ's existence? Your rationale is theirs, and so we go in circles. By the way, my argument that in the absence of absolute proof, which is almost always the case when it comes to questions of history, people will always opt for the historical interpretation that best suits their needs, hasn't even...
Okay, now, are you following? Go ahead and share. Okay, Hatun, have you seen? Do you understand his argument here?
I'm just seeing how he's like making mockery of things. Yeah.
Okay, no, but his argument is valid. Basically, he's saying your mind's already made up. You're not going to look at any evidence that says that he didn't exist. You'll just sit there and mock and laugh. Now, let's take that on board, and that is true. I would suggest for the 99% of all Muslims, they're not even going to investigate his historicity. That's not important for them. I understand that. His idea, and you're going to see it's coming on later, his conclusion is the much better argument is to mock Muhammad and to talk about his sexual proclivities and to talk about his violence. Therefore, they're going to listen to you. Do you see how stupid this is?
So I think doesn't matter whether you dislike Muhammad or not. It doesn't matter you respect him or you don't respect him. Regardless, you need to look at the evidence. You need to kind of you don't dig into Muhammad whether he's historically exists or not because you don't like him. That's not the case.
Okay, it comes back much more simple than that. This material is not a popular argument on the popular level. I've had many people come up to me. They say, how can I use this with so-and-so, who's my greengrocer neighbor? I said, this is not for them. This is an academic argument. This is for academics. These are for the makers and shakers of Islam. These are for the next future leaders of Islam. They're going to have to answer this argument, because I know lots of Muslims are watching on my videos and they're saying, I don't know how to answer this, but Sheikh so-and-so knows it, or Ahmed so-and-so, or Abdul so-and-so knows how to answer it. So when I say go and bring them back and show me what they're saying, a lot of them don't want to answer it, because I'm always demanding 4 things. If they, and you know what those 4 are. This man who has this name has to live at this time doing these things in this place. If they're not going to introduce or support from those four things, we're not going to have a debate. And the problem is, the person on the street can't do that. They can't argue that. So this whole historical critique, what we call the external critique, is not for the people on the street. This is for the academics. This is for the leaders of Islam. They're going to have to answer this, because many of their followers are asking them to answer this. Now, what you're doing, Hatu, and what Raymond would rather you, he's going to get to it, looking and show what's the word I'm looking for?
Messed up, embarrassing his life is.
How embarrassing he is, that he's just not, how irrelevant he is for the 21st century. That argument is on a populist level. The problem is, and we'll get to that, I'm going to show you some problems with that, but it is absolutely essential for the people on the ground. That's why don't stop doing it. Raymond and you need to stop. You need to continue doing that argument, because that will confront people on the ground. But this idea that Muslims will never even pay attention to this is absolutely true. He is correct on that. That's why this is not for the populace on the ground. This is not for the greengrocer down the street. This is not for your next door neighbor or someone who's in your family who's become a Muslim. It'll go right over their heads. More than that, they won't even understand the question. This is for the people that have to really answer the people on the ground who are saying, how are you going to deal with this guy? How are you going to deal with this question, whether he existed or not? How would you deal with the Sheikh so-and-so, or Pir so-and-so? How are you going to deal with this? Marubu so-and-so. They are going to ones that have to happen. I just did it last week in Minneapolis. We went to a Somali mosque, and we went up there, and we waited for them to come out, and they came out in their hordes, and I made a beeline for the imam. He was dressed like an Arab. I knew he has to be the imam, and went right up to him, put my hand down, and said, I want to talk to you. And of course, he had all of his talibés around him. He said, okay, let's talk. And I said, okay. And we brought up your argument on the Qira'at and the Akhruf. He says, they're all the same. They're all the same. So we had 2 of them. We have the Hafs and the Warsh, and we put it right in front of him. And we showed the difference between the Hafs and Warsh just on 2 verses. He didn't know what to do. You could see, he didn't want to talk about it. He was absolutely infuriated that we brought this up in front of all his talibés. Those are the guys that you need to go to, because those are the ones that understand this historical argument. They are the ones that understand the problem with the preservation of the Quran. They are the ones that understand the problem if there's no Mecca. They are the ones that understand the problem if they can't find any reference for this man named Muhammad at all in the century he lived. Because of that, make sure that this is geared towards those people. It can go through the populist level and been directed at those people, but at some point and at some time, the makers and shakers, the peers, the sheikhs, the marabouts, they're going to have to come up with an response to this discussion.
Well, once they come up, we kind of have a rebuttals, or we respond, or we listen what they are saying, and then take it from there.
Which is almost always the case when it comes to questions of history. People will always opt for the historical interpretation that best suits their needs. Hasn't even begun to factor in the powerful faith element involved in questions about religion or religious figures, as in the current case. If secular people will adopt a historical interpretation that is most emotionally satisfying, religious people will do so on an even more extreme level. That's because for religious folk, questions about the past are further tied up with their faith. Just as Christian belief in Jesus is ultimately rooted in faith, not this or that historical record, so too is Muslim belief in Muhammad ultimately rooted in faith. So it's a double whammy. Think about it. Do you really expect believers to be moved by the claims of non-believers, especially when those claims can't be proven, and those non-believers making those claims, in this case those infidels, are already seen as committed enemies of Islam who will stop at nothing to destroy it? Hence why, and with all due respect, I marvel at anyone who thinks the claim that Muhammad never existed is revolutionary and somehow going to rock the Muslim world to its core. It hasn't, and it won't. Trust me. Having said all that, and to reiterate, my purpose in making this video is not to attack or even deny the claims that Muhammad never existed. Nor is this a personal attack on Dr. J. Smith, whose name I mentioned, or any of the other proponents of the Muhammad myth. Far be it. I'm sure they all have good reason for saying what they say. And if you personally believe that Muhammad never existed, that's fine by me. I've already given you my reasons for believing that a Muhammad figure existed, and I'm a live and let live kind of guy. Rather, my point is that claims against Muhammad, whatever their merits, cannot by nature be proven, and are therefore at best academic and totally inconsequential to Muslims. Just as, and for the same reasons that, arguments against Jesus Christ's existence have been academic and totally inconsequential amongst Christians. Please don't underestimate the psychological element involved here. If you believe that Muhammad never existed, that's very likely because you already dislike him. Hence, any argument against him will take on a strong quality in your mind. But it's for this very same reason that the exact opposite occurs amongst Muslims. Because they love Muhammad, any argument against him, especially one that cannot be proven, will be seen as a pathetic attempt by those infidels against Islam. In this sense, Islam's nearly 2 billion Muslims are like the world's 2.5 billion Christians who, without a second thought, laugh at and dismiss claims that Christ never existed. Put differently, it's ultimately because you are against Muhammad that you are interested in and convinced by subjective arguments against him. And it's ultimately because Muslims are for Muhammad that they will never be interested in, much less convinced by the same subjective arguments. What are ultimately subjective claims against a religious figure appear very powerful only because you, the subject, are personally against that religious figure. If you're for that religious figure, they become laughable. Okay, so you're an avowed foe of Islam who would see it swept up in the dustbin of history. Hence why you were so happy to jump on the Muhammad never existed bandwagon. So what now? I'll tell you what now. Whoever is interested in effectively opposing Islam must do so at its own game. That's the way it's always been and the way it's always going to be. You must embrace the Muslim paradigm and accept Islam's first premise, that the Quran, the Seerah, Hadith, etc., in a word, Islam's scriptures, do indeed contain the teachings of Muhammad and his God. But then you must show how such teachings contradict reason, logic, decency, morality, and especially godliness. Such is the original approach, the only tried and true polemic that has from the first century following Muhammad's death, via the writings of John of Damascus, arguably history's first polemicist against Islam, till the present moment been challenging and convincing Muslims that theirs is a false prophet. On the other hand, merely insisting that he never existed may be personally satisfying, but it's also a way of putting yourself out of the debate altogether, rendering yourself totally moot. So there it is, my 2 cents on Muhammad's existence. Let me know what you think in the comments.
Yes, Jay.
Oh, okay. Well, see, isn't it
That
fascinating?
was it, just like he believes there is no evidence. So
Okay, and somewhere, I guess it was the one before. I thought at some point he says the best polemic is what we call the internal polemic.
oh, well, he's got 1 second left. I think it's finished.
No, he does say that somewhere. I think it was maybe in the first video he said that
Okay.
that the best polemic is actually showing how irrelevant, and he did say that right at the very end. Sorry, he did say at the very end that the best polemic is how irrelevant Muhammad is for today. That he's just not relevant because of all these bad breath, we call them bad breath problems. These embarrassing problems about him. Now, notice what he's making here. He says no one's going to listen to you because you're a critique of Islam. You're not a believer. And by virtue of the fact that you're not a believer, they're just not going to listen to you. Doesn't that work for him as well?
Looks like it works.
Looks like it's the same argument against his paradigm. If he's not a believer and he's showing how irrelevant Muhammad is, why would they listen to him? So it goes both ways, that argument. And I don't think he realizes that. What he's throwing at me, that they're not going to listen to me because I am a white American middle class educated Christian. They're not going to listen to me because I'm the wrong color and I'm the wrong with the wrong accent, living in the wrong country. Then why would they listen to him, who also is living in the wrong country and is from the wrong religion? He's the right color, but he's the wrong religion. So it goes both ways, that argument. So that's kind of a neither here or there. So I would be careful that, look in the mirror. You're throwing the aspersions. But now we get to the real nut of the problem. He's saying this is the weakest of all arguments. And he says no one is convinced by it. I've already answered that and said it was hugely significant for Christianity, and it almost destroyed Christianity in the last century. What's this? He is saying Muslims are not interested in historical facts, sola fide, as opposed to sola fide. Okay, explain that?
No, you just go on. Islam is making a point like Muslims don't care about history.
Okay, absolutely true. And I agree with that. They don't care about history, and they also don't care about whether you like Muhammad or not, or whether or not Muhammad fits your paradigm, because if he fits their paradigm. So to me, that's even a weaker argument. If you keep on saying how embarrassing he is, they say, no, he's not embarrassing. He actually is a great model. In fact, we like to, that's why we love following him so much, because he's so much more relevant than Jesus is or anybody else is. And so that his paradigm is also just as weak or even weaker than the historical. But to be fair, I know that most people won't listen to what we're saying. And I know that most people, it'll go right over their heads. Here's what's interesting. I've just come back from Africa, and I've also come back from South America, and I've also come back. I can't tell you what countries. I'm not permitted to do that. But I've been in 7 different countries in the last 6 months. The last 8 months. The last 8 months, I've been in 7 different countries. I'm going to be in another 6 in the next 5 months. And what I'm finding almost everywhere I go is that they want this material. They don't want Raymond's material. I'll tell you why. What they're saying is when we watch David Wood, we love watching David Wood. We love watching Hatun Tash. They're so entertaining. But we can't use this in Africa, in the countries they live in, especially in a country like Nigeria. Because if we used any of Hatun's material, or even showed her video with all those pictures at the front of it, we would be killed. We would be put to death. You can't use the irrelevancy of Muhammad or the violence of Muhammad or his misogyny against women. You can't use that in Africa because we would be killed, because it is considered to be mocking. It's considered to be highly dangerous. So we never show those videos, and we never, ever have that kind of stuff coming out of our mouth. But your videos, Jay, we can show your videos every time. And the reason why is because you're not mocking Muhammad. You're not saying anything against Muhammad. In fact, you're not even talking about him. You're just saying he didn't exist. So why waste time talking about his irrelevancy? He just didn't know whatever was there. And more than that, you're just using neutral historical criticism to come to your point, to make your point. You're not sitting there and reading the Quran or making fun of the Quran or mocking these verses or saying how stupid these verses are or how contradictory they are or whether or not they're misogynist or full of violence. You're just saying there was no Quran. Why waste our time reading it? You're making neutral historical statements. That's what we can use. We can use these neutral historical statements because there's no hate speech in what you're doing, and there's no Islamophobia. We're not called Islamophobes. And that's true, Hatu. The more that I've been using this historical material, I get no more death threats anymore. Hardly any. I don't see people coming up wanting to kill me because there's nothing that I'm saying that's worthy of being killed. What they're saying is, okay, that's a good question. Let me ask my imam. Okay, I understand. I'll talk to you next week. I said, okay, I hadn't thought about that. That's true. Maybe there is a problem here. Maybe we should try to find Mecca, or maybe we should try to find a manuscript of the Quran that is exactly like the Quran we have today. Or maybe we should look into this Qira'at problem. Or, I see what you're saying. I don't have an answer, but I know so-and-so has it. That's what happened last week in Minneapolis. This imam, he could not answer it. He said, okay, I want you to come next week. We're going to bring an expert, and he's going to shut you down. So it's going to happen in another 2 weeks. I'm not going to be there, but the guy that had the Watershed and the Huffs, he's going to do the debate for us. He's going to do the debate with this quote unquote expert. You can see that's why this material is so hugely important, because anybody can use it in any place. You can use it in the most hostile environment, and you're not. Well, I should be careful of that. Probably not the most hostile environment. You don't want to use this in Afghanistan or in places like that. But certainly in Nigeria you can. And you can use it in Ethiopia, and certainly you can use it in Kenya and all over Africa. But you cannot use the arguments of what we call the internal critique. The internal critique is what you do, Hatun, and what Sam Shamoun and David Wood and Raymond Ibrahim are doing. And that is looking and showing how irrelevant, how hopelessly stupid this man is, how embarrassing he is, the embarrassing argument. That you can't use in Africa. In most places they can't. But this material you can. Okay?
It's good that in the body of Christ, we all have different skills and different interests, and in the purpose of reaching to the lost for glorious gospel of our glorious God, we use many different arguments and arguments. So in that sense, it is good, because at the end, our goal is we don't want Muslims to end up in hell, because our God doesn't want them to end up in hell. So we use whatever argument is there, whatever works for what, and we go for it. And it's good to know that brothers and sisters around the world are using wisdom to approach their neighbors or approach their Muslim friends to preach the gospel of Lord Jesus Christ. So in that sense, it is very, very encouraging. Have you got anything else you want to add on what has been said by Raymond Ibrahim? So I know you had PowerPoint. Sorry, we couldn't show them, but is there any slides that you want to kind of bring our attention from your PowerPoints?
Yeah, let me end with this, and this is probably a good way to wrap up on what you're saying, bring it together. When we're talking about polemics, remember polemics is going on the offense. We're not talking about apologetics now. Apologetics, you're defending Jesus, you're defending the Bible. You better know Jesus, you better know the Bible intricately and to be a good apologist. When you use polemics against Islam, you better know two things. You better know Muhammad and you better know the Quran and the traditions that go with that. Now, there are three forms of polemics that we're talking about. And what Ibrahim is referring to is the first form of polemics, which is by far the most popular. And that is just looking at the Quran and opening its pages and reading it, reading the text, and then confronting what's on the page. This is internal polemics because it's internal to the Muslim. It's what they need, it's what they follow, it's what they believe. That's called internal polemics. And then it's looking at the man behind this book, Muhammad, and confronting what he did and what he said. That's looking at the book and the man. So this is the book and the man behind it, Muhammad, looking what he said, looking what he did, and confronting his actions and confronting his speeches. That's called internal polemics. And that is by far the most popular polemics. It's what you do, Hatun. It's what Raymond does. It's what everybody does. I do it too. Every once in a while, I will open the Quran and confront it. But I'm moving away from that more and more because I'm not getting many converts. I'm getting much more converts using the historical critique. Now, the second form of polemics is what we call cultural polemics. Cultural polemics is what you do also, Hatun. You do a great job of this. That's looking and seeing what Islam is doing today. This whole thing with what you're doing with Muhammad Hijab and this thing with Ali Dawa, it's brilliant. You're showing how irrelevant they are, how these practices, these cultural practices that are in Islam, they just don't make sense. And they're actually embarrassing living in Britain and allowing this to happen. That's the cultural mandate, looking and seeing what Islam is doing in different countries around the world, what it's doing in Europe, what it's doing in America, and showing that the Muslims, if they follow this book and they follow that man, what they do actually in real life is absolutely embarrassing. It's shocking, and it is not relevant for the 21st century. That's called cultural polemics. Brilliant stuff. And you do a great job at that, Hatun. Please continue doing that. You do a great job at the internal polemics. Continue to do that because we need people to unpack these traditions like you do to show how stupid they are and how they just don't make sense for today. Now, the third polemics is what I do. That's called the external polemics, which is the historical polemics. We don't even open one page of this book. We don't read it. We don't even look at the Muhammad of this book. We don't waste our time reading those pages, and we don't waste our time seeing what Muhammad said or did. Why in the world do we waste our time looking at Muhammad and looking at the Quran if they never existed? Bingo. It's as simple as that. What we're doing in the external critique is looking at the foundations. If this man did not exist, if this place, Mecca, did not exist, if this book, the Quran, did not exist in the 7th century, as the Muslim traditions tell us, then there is no Islam. If there is no Islam, then what are we going to do with almost 2 billion people that Raymond's talking about? Where are they going to have to go? Where are they going to go and look? Because these people are as close to us as you can get. That's why I love Muslims. They actually do believe in God. Don't take away that belief in God. Just bring him home to the real God. They actually believe in revelation. Don't take them away from revelation. Just bring them back to the real revelation. They actually do believe in Isa. That's the wrong Jesus. Let's take him away from Isa and bring him back to Yeshua, the real Jesus. So what I want to do is I want to get these people who I love so much. I spent over 40 years working with them. I'd be wasting my time if I didn't love them, and get them away from Islam that's making all the problems and doing this whole irrelevancy and is creating so much havoc around the world, violence, and is showing them how distorted they are in their lifestyle from how they should be working. And we need to bring them home to a better book, a better man, and a better place. And the book is the Bible, the man is Jesus Christ, and the place is Jerusalem, and eventually the new Jerusalem, where we're all going to be walking and talking with that man, Jesus Christ. Let's bring him home.
And thank you very much. Let me just say thank you for few super chat. Boring politics. Thank you very much for your generosity. And at this stage, I'm just believing Diamond is just like, what is it, trolling the chat and wasting his monies. Well, I know I need to say thank you for your generosity, but like your comments and the things you are putting there is just like, seriously, just waste of money. Please use your money wisely. You are accountable for it. And just like, anyway, that's all I'm gonna say. It's not in an intention of insult or anything. Just like, be wise for the resources Lord giving to you, because you are accountable for it. So what I'm taking it from you, Jay, is there is, which I had the same thought before the live stream, and live stream went on for 1 hour 50 minutes 5 seconds, and I still have the same thought, that there are serious questions when it comes to Muhammad, when it comes to Islam outside of traditional Islamic sources, needs to be answered. And so far, history doesn't answer those questions. So far, those questions are hanging, and we want individuals, academics or Muslims, to engage with questions and then fill the gap that we are asking Muslims to do. At the end, like, when you look from the traditional perspective, eternity of Muslims are very, very bad place, and we really don't want that. We really don't want that. Would that be like fair to say Islam and history do not work together as a complementary?
Absolutely not. And that's why it's so much nicer for us to bring him back to Christianity, because we do not have this problem. I think there's that famous quote that, what's this? Well said, Al-Kalbi. I mean, this is the great thing about it. There's this famous quote that says there has never been a properly understood biblical, there has never been a controversy that controverts a properly understood biblical statement. We have yet to find any biblical statement, both Old and New Testament, that is controverted historically, once you understand the entire what the statement is making, and also once you understand where the historical support is or not support is for that statement. Now, that is something that only the Bible has gone through. It is only the Bible that has been asked all these questions, these historical questions. We're just now beginning to ask these historical questions of Islam. And what we're saying is that these are green paper questions. At some point, we're going to get to the white paper. Or is it the other way around? I've been told now I've been wrong on that. Maybe these are the white papers, and sometime we're going to get to the green papers. These are just what if scenarios. We are just coming up with lots of questions that we haven't answered yet. So I'm not ready to say what then did happen. How then did Muhammad get chosen? I think I know where to say. I can say tentatively how Muhammad finally came about. I cannot say categorically that yet, because that's going to take about another 10, maybe 20 years before we get all that in place. But we're starting to get there. We're starting to see that image of Muhammad starting to form around the beginning of the 8th century, probably formed pretty well by the end of the 8th century, but not in the 7th century. That Muhammad did not exist in the 7th century. Now, I can say that now, 2025, July, what is today? July the 10th. July 10th, 2000.
Today is the birthday of Quran, by the way. Birthday of 1924 Quran, right?
Well, it's the one that was chosen. You're right. But even you have reference after reference that they had to completely change that and manipulate it 7 times until finally in 1936, they finally got one that they were happy with. And that one was the one that was finally chosen for Egypt and then chosen for the whole world in 1985. But you're right. July 10th is the 1924 when they dumped the other 29 into the Nile. And thank God for you, Hatun, for really bringing that to the public. If it hadn't been for you going and actually doing all the hard work of finding those 26 Qurans, which now are up to 37, we would not have known that publicly. That would not have been known. And outside of what you did in 2016, people would still believe there's only one Quran. And there was that every word and every letter is exactly the same. Even that statement right there has been so categorically disproven that should show you that, and that's a historical statement you were making. That's called textual criticism, which is straight out of the historical critique. And what you did in 2016 by showing that publicly so the whole world could see has just devastated the Quran, its preservation. So much so that the rest of us now can just say, just look at the video, just look at the video, just look at the video. That's all we need to do. So certainly there is going to be an awful lot yet more to be done. And I'm not ready to say exactly where Muhammad finally was created as the Muhammad with the Dhamma, Fatha, and the Fatha, where that Muhammad, the Muhammad we're looking at today, the one that we see in the traditions, I would suggest that that was probably not canonized, that Muhammad, until after the 11th century. That's my guess here on July the 10th, 2025. I can well be proven wrong. What I will say categorically is there was no Muhammad, not the Muhammad of Islam, who was the one that received the Quran in a 22-year period from 610 to 632 in two cities called Mecca and Medina. There was no Mecca. There was a Yathrib, but not a Medina. And there is no place that we can see where this man called himself a Muslim and would belong to a religion called Islam by 632. That I can say categorically.
Okay. One of the practical thing I can do is I try to figure out the ways to get in touch with Raymond Ibrahim and then see if he wants to have open dialogue, discussion, or debate on this. We can arrange that. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So questions are up there. It's just such a strange, every time when I have Dr. J. Smith, we end up having like more questions than we started. And that's a good thing in one sense. That's a good thing. Jay, what is happening with you in this next couple of weeks, or something that people can be praying for you, can be looking out? Things are coming on your channel?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff. Fander Films, we're putting the one that has just gone up. I'm going to put this one up if you don't mind. You don't mind me taking it and slapping it on my channel as well, because this is a good follow-up to what was just put up this morning. The big talk that I did in Calvary Chapel, because of the fact it went viral, the first talk, they wanted me to do the newest material. So all I'm doing in the newest material is shutting down Raymond Ibrahim, his 10 points, but I'm also introducing two new things. One is the Mahmud argument, which may not be new to you, Hatun, and then the extant manuscripts. That is by far the most devastating material. And that one, I just go through and I show what Dr. Pat Andrews has been able to find in the last, this is 2 years of work that he's put into this, looking at all the extant manuscripts. And I have taken on board what Sheikh Farid has said. I've answered his responses. Well, he calls himself Sheikh Farid, but the Farid, whatever his name is. But he has tried, he's trying to pull all these books off the shelf, say, you have forgotten about this one, you've forgotten about this one, the Musnad here, the Munabi over here, the Al-Malki here. And we've chucked every one of the ones that he pulled off the shelf, and we've one of them down, and all of them are 11th century or later. He has no idea that these are not Sahaba or Tabi'un texts, though he claims that they are. So we have done all of that, and that's now up online. You can go look at it. Now, it may be that when you look at it, you may want me to come back and unpack that a little bit more, because that's a much more devastating argument. And it also shows that almost everything we know about Muhammad, about the early Islam, about Mecca, about the Quran, everything we know about the origins of Islam, really what we can say only starts to be codified and put in the canonical form. Know what I'm saying? That canonical form from the 11th century on, which means there probably was a Quran before that. And I'm sure there are, because the manuscript suggests that. There was probably even someone named Muhammad that was probably introduced in the late 8th century before that. But the Muhammad that we get today, and the Quran that we get today, and the story, his backstory that we get today, all comes from the 11th to the 16th century. Much of it Ottoman, therefore redacted back, therefore has been accreted and deleted. The fact that we can't find anything earlier than the 11th century for any extant manuscript is troubling, because all of this was written in places like Baghdad, where the caliph was commissioning this. These people that wrote it, Ibn Hisham, Al-Waqidi, Bukhari, these are all people living in Baghdad, and they were writing it on parchment, on animal skin. They were not writing it on papyrus. They didn't need papyrus. Papyrus is for poor people. That's what all we had in the early church. They were writing on animal skins, which means they still should be here today. And what I've just found out now, even the Muslim tradition says that Muhammad had 65 scribes, and we know the names of all 65 of them. We have them all. We have the names of all 65 scribes that were there around Muhammad, listening to what he said, listening to what he did, writing down his letters, writing down the Quran. What happened to these 65 scribes, and what happened to all this material? What happened to all these letters that supposedly he commissioned and sent to all these people? That has just found out today. That's just now we're being introduced. There's an awful lot yet more to go. Can you see how this is really going to shut down Islam?
Remember when 70 people, just 70 people who memorized the Quran dies in the time of Abu Bakr in Battle of Yamama. So 70, it's only like, it's not even huge number. 70 people dies, and suddenly Muslim world is shaking because they are so concerned that they are losing the Quran. So like, just don't believe everything Islamic tradition says. That's the very basic principles we take it from there.
Okay, stop and think what we just said. 70 people who memorized it. What about the 65 scribes who were writing this all down? What happened to their material?
Well,
These are before
they've been
Muhammad died.
tortured. They've been tortured. Their materials are being teared apart. Like, you get to read from Islamic tradition, like 60 dirhams to tear apart people's material. It's just wonderful. Islam is so wonderful.
Until today, I thought it was just Zaid ibn Thabit, only one scribe. Now
Oh.
we're told there are 65, and we have every name of all of them.
I've got their names. I think Mustafa puts them in his book. It came like as my friend from army, but no, I forgot his name. As he's in his book, he puts together like who wrote down the Quran stuff. It's good. It's good. Lots of good material out there. Lots of good information for us to go and engage with Muslims. I was gonna finish with this. I came to conclusion that you're just trolling and wasting your money. It's like, seriously, you need to be wise and accountable for the resources Lord is giving to you. I just want to finish with truth sets us free, and that's Lord Jesus Christ. It's a good reminder. Good reminder.
We love the truth, do we not? And he has to pay
Else.
$1.99 to say that when everything we've been talking about is based on historical data. That's the beauty of it.
Truth sets us free. Lord Jesus Christ, King of Kings, Logic of Cosmos, sets us free. Jay, thank you very much for joining me. I am sure I will have you back again to kind of dig more into what you are saying.
Mhm.
And then as we hear people are responding stuff, we get them as well. So people have as much as material people can have to use in their outreach. So really appreciate that you made yourself available and joined us. And also, sorry about that we were not able to share their PowerPoint slides as well as we started, I think, 3 minutes late. Sorry about that, by God's grace. Hopefully we won't repeat that again. Jay, once again, thank you very much for joining me, as well as thank you very much everyone who in the chat who joined us. By God's grace, we will see you again.